Welcome to Midlife Clarity with Dr. Tracy Page, a podcast for women over 40, navigating hormones, metabolism, strength, and confidence in midlife. Midlife is the moment you start asking bigger questions and expecting better answers. This is where we stop minimizing symptoms, dismissing perimenopause and menopause changes, second-guessing ourselves, and accepting this is just how it is. Instead, we get informed. We get curious. We get clear. Because midlife isn't about hot flashes or hormone shifts. It's about energy, strength, metabolism, relationships, identity, purpose, healthy aging. On this podcast, Dr. Tracy Page blends evidence-based medical insight with honest conversations to help you understand what's happening in your body, support your hormones, strengthen your metabolism, and build lasting confidence in this next chapter. You deserve clarity about your health, and clarity changes everything. Here's Dr. Tracy Page.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tracy Page, and welcome to Midlife Clarity, where we talk about real topics that affect you every day with real statistics and always real answers. Today, we're going to talk about the Peptide Reset, how a 48-year-old can out-engineer her own aging. Melissa is what we'll call her. She's 48, she's perimenopausal, and she has a 10-year layered history of escalating symptoms hidden inside a high-functioning life. Her labs come back, quote, normal, but the reference range was built on the average 48-year-old American woman. And the average 48-year-old American woman is likely sarcopenic, inflamed, and quietly losing her hormones. So it's important to know that normal isn't healthy. Normal is just average when you look at those labs. So let's look at Melissa a little bit closer. She walks into my office and she's carrying folders. When I get into the room, she actually has 2 folders, color-coded, and she apologizes before she even begins. She's been told she's fine, and that's where the apology comes from. She thinks maybe it's her. She's here because she's not fine, and she's starting to wonder maybe she's losing her mind. Let me tell you more about Melissa's last 10 years, because this is the pattern I see almost every week, and I want you to listen for the version of yourself within it. In her late 30s, after her second child, Melissa noticed her energy never quite came back. She chalked this up to motherhood. Around 40, the workouts she'd done since college, the same workouts, stopped producing the same results. The scale crept up about 1 pound a year, and the weight stopped sitting where it used to. It moved to her midsection. She tightened her diet, and she still gained 1 pound almost every year. At 42, she started catching every illness her kids brought home and holding on to each one twice as long. At 43, she developed bloating after meals she'd eaten her whole life, and by 44, certain foods like wheat, dairy, some things she couldn't identify, made her feel foggy and inflamed for days. Her primary care doctors said her celiac panel was negative and suggested a probiotic. At 45, she noticed her hair on the bathroom floor, especially in the mornings, just a little, then more. Her part widened, her ponytail thinned, and at 46, the night sweats started, even though her cycles were still regular. She woke up at 3 a.m. with a racing heart and couldn't fall back to sleep. Her joints started aching after her spin class, not from an injury, just a low, persistent ache that hadn't been there before. At 47, she developed brain fog, so significant she missed an important deadline at work. She made an appointment with her neurologist. They did a brain MRI, and you guessed it, it was normal. At 48, last month, she stepped on the scale and saw she had gained 9 pounds in just 1 year, almost entirely around her midsection, despite eating less than she had ever had in her whole life. Her primary care visit produced blood work that came back, and I quote, all within normal limits. The thyroid's normal, CBC is normal, your metabolic panel is normal. Her cholesterol was borderline, high, but, quote, nothing to worry about, and she was told she might benefit from maybe an antidepressant. Here's what no one had told Melissa until she walked into our office. Her IGF-1, a marker for growth hormone activity, that's how you measure it, came back at 92. The reference range starts at 53. And technically, she is in range, but that range was built on the average 48-year-old woman, and the average 48-year-old woman, as I said, is sarcopenic, inflamed, and quietly losing her hormones. So Melissa wasn't failing. The reference range was actually failing her. Today, we're going to put real numbers on what declines and when. We're going to talk about a class of molecules called peptides that are getting enormous attention right now. Some of it earned, some of it's dangerous. And we're going to walk through the FDA decisions that just changed the landscape, and almost 2 weeks ago when I'm recording this. By the end of this episode, you're going to understand exactly what Melissa's body's asking for and what the next decade of her health can look like if she has the answers. Let me give you the numbers because the numbers do the work. Muscle. From the time you turn 30 and you start losing muscle mass at roughly 3 to 8% per decade. That accelerates after 50. Strength itself drops between 16 and 41%. From women under 40 to women over 40. And yes, that's not a typo or a misread or anything. By the time you're postmenopausal, and we should say in menopause, you can be losing 1 to 2% of leg lean body mass per year. Okay, let's talk about bones. Bone density holds up through our 40s, and then it starts to fall off a cliff. Between 50 and 59, that age bracket, and then 60 plus, body bone mineral density drops about 16%. Bone mineral content drops about 23%. And once estrogen leaves, bone resorption way outpaces bone formation. Your skeleton becomes a withdrawal account with no deposits. Okay, hormones. The menopausal transition begins 5 years before the final menstrual period. The average final period is between 46 and 52, which means a woman in her early 40s is already in it, even if the cycle hasn't told her yet. Estradiol drops, progesterone drops first and faster, testosterone has been declining since her 20s, and her DHEA peaks at 25, then falls about 2% per year for the rest of her life. Okay, growth hormone. Growth hormone secretion drops about 14% per decade after the age of 30. And by 60, most women are producing roughly half of what they made at age 25. Think about that. IGF-1, the downstream messenger, falls right along with it. And that's the one that I said she was only 93. Immune function. Thymic involution. So you know your thymus gland? The slow shrinking of the gland that transitions your T cells starts in your 20s and is about 90% complete by 60. This is why Melissa can't shake a cold. Her immune system is broken and it's understaffed. Gut barrier. Here's one almost no one tells you about. And this is really important, so please listen. Estrogen helps maintain the integrity of the intestinal lining, and as estrogen falls in perimenopause and in menopause, intestinal permeability, you got it, increases. The gaps between the cells of the gut wall widen, and this allows inflammatory particles that should stay in the gut. They start drifting into the circulation, our bloodstream. They fuel systemic inflammation, joint pain, brain fog, and food reactions that didn't exist 5 years ago. This is the piece that connects Melissa's bloating, her brain fog, her joint aches, and her new food sensitivities into a single story. Let's talk about visceral fat. And finally, we talk about the band that's around her waistline. The visceral fat that develops in midlife is not the same as the subcutaneous fat under the skin. Think about the subcutaneous fat is that cellulite we don't like. Visceral fat is metabolically active. It produces inflammatory cytokines. It drives insulin resistance. It contributes to cardiovascular disease. And most women gain visceral fat in midlife, even when their total body weight stays relatively stable. This is why Melissa is eating less than ever and still expanding at the waistline. Hair, skin, and metabolism. Resting metabolic rate drops 1 to 2% per decade after 20. Female pattern hair loss affects up to 40% of women by age 50. Collagen synthesis declines about 1% per year after 25, and an additional 30% loss in the first 5 years after menopause. Think of the body at 48 as a construction site that's lost its foreman. Okay, so the foreman kind of directs everyone. The crew is still there. The materials are still there, but the work orders aren't coming through. The foreman is not there to lead the crew. Growth hormone, or IGF-1, and the signaling peptides that organize cellular repair, those are the foremen. Without them, the workers stand around. The building doesn't collapse overnight. It just stops being maintained. And eventually, you can see it from the street because it looks worn down. Okay, so here's what I want you to pay close attention to because there's a lot of bad information in this space about peptides. A peptide is a short chain of amino acids, the same amino acids that build every protein in your body. The difference is length. Proteins are long, complex strains. Peptides are short, often between 2 and 50 amino acids, and that shorter length is what makes them powerful. They're small enough to act as messengers. Your body already makes thousands of peptides. Insulin is a peptide that comes from your pancreas. Oxytocin is a peptide. We call that the love hormone. Glucagon is another peptide that comes from your pancreas. Growth hormone, releasing hormone, is another. It's your growth hormone. So growth hormone, releasing hormone is your growth hormone. It is a peptide. These are the molecules your endocrine system uses to talk to itself. When we use therapeutic peptides, we're not introducing something foreign. We're reintroducing a signal your body has either lost or the signal has gotten really quiet. Think of it this way. Hormone replacement is, for lack of a better word, a sledgehammer. So it's powerful, sometimes necessary, but it's blunt. It works quickly. You're kind of forcing a settling on the entire system. Peptide therapy is like a smart thermostat. It doesn't override your body's climate control, but it restores a signal so the climate control can do its job. Both have a place because, I'm a huge fan of hormones. But for a 48-year-old whose system is still capable of producing those, she's just under-instructed. The thermostat is often the right tool first for her, and in this case. Now, what peptides are not? They are not anabolic steroids. They are not testosterone. They are not all the same as the GLP-1s like semaglutide and tirzepatide. And although technically those are peptides, and we'll come back to them and I'll give a distinction later. They're not a supplement, and therefore you should not be ordering them off the internet, and we're going to talk more about that. Actually, this is one of the most important things I will say in this episode. The peptides being discussed in functional medicine right now exist in a very specific regulatory gray zone. That zone just shifted, and we're going to talk about exactly how in the next segment. Okay, so what has changed? The FDA update and what didn't change. In 2023, the FDA moved 19 commonly compounded peptides to something we call Category 2 list. So in plain English, if a substance is on a Category 2, a 503A compounding pharmacy cannot legally make it for patients. So there are two types of pharmacies. There's 503A, which compounds medication specifically for a patient. So I write a prescription for my patient, goes to the compounding pharmacy, they produce a medication, a drug, and then it's given to the patient, and it's only for that patient. There's a 503B pharmacy that also makes medications that can be dispensed to clinic. This is something like B12 injections or vitamin D injections. So something that a patient may need, but multiple patients may need it, and it's not specifically for one patient. It can be compounded and sent to the clinic. Therefore, a patient can have a vitamin B12 injection. Okay, so that's the difference between 503A and 503B. So remember, Category 2 list. If it's on a Category 2 list, the substance cannot be legally made for patients. Overnight, peptides that thousands of patients have been using, like BPC 157, thymosin alpha 1, CJC ipamorelin, TB500, also known as TB4, they all became unavailable through legitimate channels. So what did we see? We saw a black market grow up to fill the gap. And that's all the peptides you find on the internet. Patients started ordering what we call research peptides from, I should say, online sources with no quality control, no sterility. So nothing is being verified if it's sterile or not, and no medical oversight. However, on February 27th, 2026, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. publicly signaled the ASA administration's intent to revisit those restrictions. So this topic was brought up. The companies that had originally nominated those peptides for review withdrew their nominations. And as of April 23rd, 2026, the peptides came off the Category 2 list. Now, here's where I have to slow you down. Coming off the Category 2 list is not the same thing as FDA approval. It's not even the same thing as being approved for compounding. Now, they did approve the substances used to make the compounding medications. So on July 23rd and 24th of this year, 2026, the FDA Pharmacy Compounding Advisory Committee will meet to review whether these peptides should be moved to Category 1, the list that allows 503A pharmacies to compound them while under FDA review. The committee's recommendation is non-binding. Formula rulemaking comes after that, and the process typically takes more than a year. So, if you take one thing from this segment of the podcast, take this. The legal landscape has cracked open, but it's not opened all the way, and we are in a window. And how patients access these therapies during this window matters as much as whether they access them at all. Okay, if a peptide is being sold to you online by an influencer without a prescription, by a company that calls it for research purposes only, that is the gray market. That is what created the safety problem in the first place. The right path is a physician evaluation with labs, a licensed compounding pharmacy, which is the only thing we use here at WIFM, which is Wisconsin Institute of Functional Medicine, and a real prescription that's written by a provider. Also, you need ongoing monitoring. The molecule is only as good as the chain of custody behind it. So there are two important exceptions worth knowing. Tesamorelin, which we'll discuss in a moment, and also I'm going to do a podcast for each one of these peptides, is already FDA approved for a specific indication. So tesamorelin, which makes its regulatory story just different from the others, and larazotide has been studied as well in clinical trials for nearly 2 decades. So we're going to talk about those two peptides. Now, all peptides are in the same legal bucket. We'll untangle the episode with a series of all the different peptides, but I just want to do an overview today. Okay, so let me walk you through what peptides actually do across the systems, and we'll use Melissa, who came in worried about her health. I'll name the relevant peptide for each system, but remember, we're doing a deep dive on each one in an episode coming up. And remember, this is about Melissa, so this is not medical advice. And remember that peptides are not FDA approved at this time. Okay, reverse biological aging. Growth hormone releasing peptide like CJC 1295 and ipamorelin, they work upstream. And you'll hear them a lot of times called CJC-IPA. They don't replace growth hormone, but they signal the pituitary to release it on its own. And it's the natural pulsatile pattern your body used when you were 25. Studies on growth hormone secretagogues show improvements in lean body mass, sleep architecture, skin elasticity, and IGF-1 levels within 3 to 6 months. This is the foreman coming back to the construction site and telling all the parts in the body what to do. So then that building that you see from the street starts to look fabulous, okay? Picture your endogenous growth hormone pulse like a porch light that signals the body to repair overnight. At 28, that bulb is bright. At 48, it's a bit dimmed, but by about 50%. Your body still tries to read the signal, but at a dim signal produces a dim response. Peptides like CJC 1295 and ipamorelin don't replace the bulb. They just turn the dimmer back up, so the bulb is bright. Okay, that's reversing biological aging. Number 2, musculoskeletal repair. There's a peptide called BPC-157, short for body protection compound. It has been studied for tendon healing, ligament repair, gut lining integrity, and joint inflammation. TB500, also known as thymosin beta-4, supports muscle and connective tissue regeneration. So for Melissa, whose workouts now leave her sore for 4 days instead of 1, these peptides address why repair is slow, not just symptomatically managing the pain. So she could actually take these peptides and work out like she normally does, and her recovery would be a lot quicker. I'd use these peptides too before, like when someone is post-surgery to help them heal faster. Or if they had an injury, to help them get back to whatever they want to be doing actively. Hair restoration. So female pattern hair loss is usually multifactorial. Hormonal, inflammatory, it's follicular. Peptides like GHK Cu, which is a copper peptide, have direct effects on follicle stem cells and dermal papilla activity. Combined with growth hormone secretagogues, the effect on hair density can be visible at 4 and even up to 6 months. So you usually have to wait about 6 months, I tell patients, before you see full effects. And remember, this isn't the drug finasteride. It's the cellular environment that grows healthy hair in the first place. And that's what's so great about peptides. And then remember, they're short-chain amino acids. So they're actually helping your body do what it used to do, but only now it's kind of slowed down, so it helps it do it better and like it was when you were 25. So we're going to talk about immune resilience. This is number 4. Thymosin alpha-1 is the peptide most directly relevant to Melissa's pattern of catching everything and shaking nothing. So remember, she caught the cold from her daughter, and her daughter, she told me, got over it in 2 days, and she still had a lingering cough at 3 weeks. So thymosin alpha-1 modulates the immune system, supports T cell maturation, and has been studied in chronic infections, post-viral syndromes, and oncology adjacent care. So it's been studied quite a bit. All right. For a midlife immune system that lost most of its thymic capacity, thymosin alpha-1 functions as replacement signaling for a gland that's mostly gone. So remember, I told you that gland slowly atrophies and leaves. So Melissa's immune system is, this is the best way to think about it. It's a greenhouse with a cracked roof. The soil's fine. The seeds are fine. But every storm that comes through, every viral exposure, every stressor, every inflammatory hit, it gets through those damaged, cracked roof and affects the stuff that's growing. So thymosin alpha-1 doesn't plant new seeds, it patches the roof. Once the roof is intact, which means the immune system, the soil can finally do what it was always capable of doing. Okay? And that's the body. Okay? Let's talk about gut barrier integrity. So larazotide. This is the piece that ties Melissa's bloating, her food sensitivities, her brain fog, and her joint aches into a single story. Larazotide acetate is an 8 amino acid peptide that acts as a zonulin antagonist. So zonulin is the protein that opens those tight junctions between the cells of your gut lining. In a healthy gut, those junctions open and close in a controlled rhythm. In midlife, so you have estrogen depletion, you're inflamed, you have an inflamed gut, zonulin gets stuck in the open position, and large food particles, bacterial fragments, and toxins begin leaking into our circulatory system. And they're not supposed to be there. So larazotide blocks zonulin from holding those tight junctions open. So in functional medicine, we use it for the broader leaky gut picture. The picture Melissa fits is perfect. We'll spend the entire episode coming up on larazotide because it's a foundational peptide, and I've used it often in patients with amazing results. I had one patient who told me that she had chronic musculoskeletal pain, and once we treated her gut with larazotide, all her musculoskeletal pain went away because we were treating the inflammation and we were closing those tight junctions. So, number 6, visceral fat and metabolic reset. This is where tesamorelin peptide comes in. Now, the band around Melissa's middle, the extra weight she was holding, tesamorelin is a synthetic analog of growth hormone-releasing hormone, and it is and has been FDA approved for a specific indication, visceral fat reduction. In clinical trials, tesamorelin reduced visceral adipose tissue by approximately 15% in 26 weeks and 18% in 52 weeks. So it preferentially targets visceral fat. And remember, that's the metabolically dangerous fat. So without proportional loss of lean muscle, it actually just works on the visceral fat. IGF-1 levels increased about 81% in the treatment group, with improvements in triglycerides, total cholesterol, and even adiponectin. Tesamorelin is a different regulatory category than the peptides we discussed earlier. It's FDA approved. It requires monitoring of IGF-1 to keep levels within normal range, and it is contraindicated in patients with active malignancy, uncontrolled diabetes, or pregnancy. So, but for the right patient, a midlife woman with stubborn visceral adiposity, fatty liver concerns, or escalating cardiometabolic risk, it truly can be transformative. I have found in my practice it's very difficult to prescribe tesamorelin through the regular pharmacy and hard to get it approved, but it has been available through the compounding pharmacy and worked wonders on patients. The visceral fat sitting around Melissa's organs is kind of like a smoldering basement fire. It doesn't look dramatic from upstairs. The smoke is slow, the heat is low, but it's burning around the clock. So it's releasing inflammatory signals into every floor of the house. Think of it that way. You can paint the walls upstairs all you want. You can clean and you can do everything, but it's still coming up. So kind of think of the smoldering fire is in your body. So you can eat a clean diet, do more cardio, try to have more willpower. But until you actually go downstairs to the basement and actually put out the fire, the smoke keeps rising. So until you actually take care of the problem, the visceral fat, tesamorelin basically is sending the fire crew where it actually needs to go. So it's getting rid of the visceral fat, but it gets rid of all those inflammatory signals. Okay, number 7, mitochondrial and metabolic function. What peptide affects this area? So one is called MOTS-C, MOTS-C. It's a mitochondrial-derived peptide currently under PCAC review. It works on different mechanisms. It improves how cells generate energy. For a woman whose resting metabolic rate has dropped 10 to 15% since her 20s, that's a really nice, elegant intervention. It's kind of like exercise in a peptide, right? We'll cover GLP-1 conversations, semaglutide, tirzepatide, more on MOTS-C in dedicated episodes, because these all belong in different conversations than the one we're having today. Today is an overview of all the peptides, okay? So how do the peptides look for Melissa? What do they do for her and how do they help her? So this is what we did for Melissa, and I want to walk you through the order of operations because the order, like I always says, matters just as much as the treatment, okay? First, comprehensive labs. Not the standard panel, but a functional medicine panel. So we do what's called a wellness panel with thyroid, GI, and hormonal add-ons. And so we did a full thyroid panel, including reverse T3, sex hormone panel, including free testosterone and estradiol, progesterone, and DHEA, IGF-1, inflammatory markers, including high-sensitivity CRP, homocysteine, fasting insulin, hemoglobin A1C, vitamin D, B12, ferritin. The list goes on, but we do a very comprehensive basic panel, okay? And all of this is in context of zonulin. A comprehensive also stool analysis was needed because we wanted to see if she had permeable gut, which she presented like she did. So second, foundations before peptides. So I want you to always remember that. Foundations before peptides, always. Sleep has to be optimized, nutrition assessed for adequate protein. Most midlife women are eating only about 60% of what they need in protein. We want to make sure she's doing some strength training, not just cardio, and managing her stress, which affects her HPA axis, because we need those as support. All of this is support for peptides to do their job. If you don't do this work first, peptides become a workaround for a lifestyle that isn't aligned, and the results are only going to be temporary. They're not going to be the results that you want lifelong, okay? Third, we targeted a peptide protocol, and it was sequenced. We started with larazotide for the gut barrier because nothing else works as well when the gut is leaking. Because remember, the gut is like the conductor of a symphony. And so if the conductor isn't working, the symphony falls apart and the body falls apart if the gut's not working. And I talked about this in a gut podcast that you can find on the website. Okay, so 6 weeks later, we layered in CJC ipamorelin at bedtime to restore her growth hormone pulsatile rate. Okay. And remember, you're only going to release as much growth hormone as your body wants. You can't release more because we're not giving you growth hormone. We're giving you the signal that helps your anterior pituitary make its own growth hormone. So we added then in BPC 157 for the joint and tendon recovery she was missing and thymosin alpha for the immune resilience that she needed. After 3 months, with her foundation stable and her gut quiet, we evaluated her for tesamorelin. And this was to address the visceral fat that hadn't responded to anything else. Now, she responded really well and quickly, as she already was doing a lot of the things that were correct. So she progressed pretty quickly. Some patients, it takes 6 months before we'd even talk about tesamorelin. And again, some patients, tesamorelin isn't even relevant. So it's very patient specific. So when we remeasured her IGF-1, she had moved from 92 to 158. Her bloating was gone. Her joints didn't ache after her spin class. She slept through the night for the first time in probably 2 years. and her waist was down 2 inches. Her brain fog was gone. And I just want to tell you, this isn't magic. This is what happens when your body is still capable. It just needs the right signals. And it needs to stop getting in the bad input. Okay. So you give your body that's still capable of doing all the things, the right signals it receives in the right order, and the body will respond. And I say that to patients all the time. If what we're doing is right and working, your body will respond appropriately. The body knows what to do if we give it the right things. So if you're listening to this and you recognize Melissa, if you've been told you're fine and you're not, if you've been doing everything right and the scale, the mirror, and the energy, the recovery, the gut, the hair are all telling you a different story, then I want you to hear something. Maybe it's not you. You're not failing. The reference range is failing you. So when we tell you that you're normal, take that, I think, with a grain of salt. Your body is asking for signals it stopped getting somewhere between the ages of 35 and 45 in some people, sometimes earlier, sometimes later. And the next decade is the window in which those signals matter the most. Sarcopenia, which is loss of muscle, is the hardest to reverse after 60. Bone density is the hardest to rebuild after 65. The thymus is mostly gone by age 70. Remember, that's your immune system. So the interventions we're talking about are most powerful in the years you're in, typically right now. And the regulatory window is open in a way that it hasn't been in 3 years. The window will be shaped by the July PCAC meeting, by the rulemaking that follows, and by how patients and physicians choose to engage with it. The right path, the only path I will recommend, is through a physician or a provider who's been educated in peptides and who knows your physiology, has checked your labs, uses a licensed compounding pharmacy, and a protocol designed just for your body. So no blanket protocols. Everybody's protocol should be different based on their body, their needs, and what their levels are. So in our next episodes, I'm going to do a series of episodes all on peptides. We're going to do one peptide at a time. So by the end of the series, you'll know each of these molecules and the way you know the names of your own medications or common medications, and you'll be able to have a real conversation with a real clinician about whether any of them belong in your protocol. If today's episode resonated, I want you to share it with a woman in your life who needs to hear it. And if you're ready to find out what your numbers actually say, and not what the averages tell you, you know where to find us. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Tracy Page at Midlife Clarity. And when you have clarity, everything is different.
Thanks for joining us today on Midlife Clarity with Dr. Tracy Page. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes where we continue to break down the science, the myths, and the mindset shifts around hormones, perimenopause, menopause, metabolism, and the strength for women over 40, so you can feel like yourself again, maybe even better than before. If something in today's conversation resonated with you, share it with a friend who needs to hear it. Midlife health becomes easier when we stop whispering about hormone changes and start having informed, honest conversations. Before we go, a quick reminder. The information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. It does not replace a consultation with your own physician or qualified healthcare provider. Always seek professional medical guidance regarding your personal health concerns. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, clarity changes everything.